Welcome to the last nugget of the labor market in a nutshell. Let's look at the activities to implement a labor market assessment. Where do we want to go with the labor market assessment? The report is not the goal, and it should not end up in a drawer next to other, often unread reports. But how does one get to the reports? First of all, thorough preparation is necessary. We need to define the goal depending on the resources. Who wants to know what? What budget do we have and how much time? Then we can select the appropriate labor market assessment. Since, as explained in the first section, there are many different types. Only then do we formulate the terms of reference, the composition of the team, and the profiles of the consultants in order to launch the tender. The elaboration of the labor market assessment usually starts with a research phase based on available documents. Very often, especially on national level, a variety of reports have been published during the past years that provide a good orientation. Although, after some time, you also discover recurrent formulation and outdated numbers within recent reports. The research also consists of expert consultation for additional available information, as quite often reports are only available on special demand and not for publishing purposes. While reading reports, you can already take note of actors for interviews. The next step refers to the building of working hypotheses. These are essential for focused interviews. It is much easier if you embark on a conversation with a clear idea, not only about what you want to ask, but also about what you want to verify. During these discussions, new ideas will come up that are the basis for adapted working hypotheses. In fact, research, hypotheses, and interviews often go hand in hand. At some point, you have to say, that's it. Time is always limited and you have to come to an end. A labor market assessment is never exhaustive and never perfect. This is where you finalize the report. The report itself is not the final goal. The goal is to use the report, discuss it, debate the recommendations, and arrive at a roadmap or action plan for, as the name suggests, activities. Let's have a deeper look into the research sources, hypotheses, interviews, and presentation. We start with the research. Where should we take the information from, and what are advantages and disadvantages? In an ideal world, we would have statistics and indicators that cover all workers and describe the skills-related issues in the whole labor market in a valid and reliable way. We would have a labor market information system and data can be easily retrieved. As discussed in the nugget on matching, such a system is rarely available, but information is there. We just have to look for it. It is surprising how much information you can often get from the National Bureau of Statistics and as a complementary source from sector ministries. The information is well structured but not always accessible. What you usually get is a very condensed data. More details are upon request only, and that might take time. Public employment services usually have information on occupations, qualifications, and skills in demand. Sometimes they conduct forecasts, for example, by company surveys to anticipate the demand. Very often, however, they do not cover small and medium enterprise, which is a strong part of the labor demand, as we learned in the nugget on the labor demand. In addition, they often cover selected sectors only, those where the demand is relatively high and you have to get additional information from other sources. Enterprise statistics are another good source, as especially larger companies often have their own labor market information. Tracer studies would provide valuable information on what trained people do after they leave the training center. As the names and contacts are available, tracer studies would be relatively low cost. However, they are rarely conducted. We already mentioned company surveys. Surveys in general are a good tool to get the specific information you need. However, the participation rate is usually quite low and you need a large sample to have a representative result, which may be time-consuming. In most developing countries, where a sizable part of the workforce is based in the informal sector and a large share of employment in the formal and household sectors is also informal, data collection methodologies need to ensure that all workers are covered or that the adequate estimates can be provided on their number and characteristics. Household surveys are able to cover all informal workers, but when the sources on skills are list-based, establishment surveys, or administrative registers, estimates need to be produced on the excluded population. Even when all informal workers can be covered, the validity of the resulting skills information should be questioned, as these workers will tend to obtain their skills through informal channels, not through formal education. They may be highly skilled, informally trained workers with no diplomas to show. As skill mismatch statistics and indicators are based on formal education information, inclusion of these workers will reveal the limitations of the statistics and indicators. Systematic information is rarely available and there is no easy solution. Dr. Olumide Taiwo is the Executive Director of the Helpman Development Institute, a consulting company based in Nigeria. Dr. Taiwo conducted a labor market assessment based on the holistic approach in Nigeria for Lagos State. Let's hear what he recalls from the challenges of data collection.
Thank you very much for the question. In this part of the world, where we don't have large sets of the data and information, sometimes you're looking for data and then you can't find them. So you've combed the National Bureau of Statistics, you've combed the State Bureau of Statistics, you've combed the different research institutions to see what they have, and you can't find data. So one of the ways to get around it is to constitute focus group discussions of people that have knowledge, of experts, of people in the practice, of people who can give you insights into what you are trying to get information about. And then if you can have a focus group discussion that is kind of large enough, not too large, it's large enough to include people from different areas who have different perspectives and who see the issues from different angles and who have access to different networks, I think you'll be able to make up for some data that you don't have. And one of the things that also happens is that in the course of engaging these people, you're likely to be told, to be made aware of some data sets that some people have collected and maybe they're just keeping on their shelves or in their computer somewhere that is not available publicly. So you might be able to get into such data and information.
The next step is the formulation of working hypotheses. A working hypothesis is a hypothesis that is provisionally acceptable as a basis for further ongoing research in the hope that a tenable theory will be produced even if the hypothesis ultimately fails. Like all hypotheses, a working hypothesis is constructed as a statement of expectations which can be linked to deductive exploratory research in empirical investigation and is often used as a conceptual framework in qualitative research. The term working indicates that the hypothesis is subject to change, for example, by data triangulation. Like the example above with a working hypothesis from observation that feet shrink due to confinement. You will now check different, for example, studies, interviews, or statistics in order to check whether this hypothesis is confirmed. In this sense, data triangulation refers to the application and combination of several research methods to overcome the weakness or intrinsic biases and the problems that come from a single method. One method of data triangulation is taking the information from your desk research, formulating working hypotheses, and check them during interviews or focus group discussions. Let's take an example. According to available information, newly recruited employees do not stay long. A working hypothesis would be that they have difficulties to adapt due to a lack of soft skills. They prefer to leave. You would need more information on the reasons for leaving. Possible resources would be the former employers, maybe the human resource department, and ex-employees of the companies or current job seekers who previously left a job. Now enter this information into a table that structures your action plan for the interviews. In addition to the date and time and the person who is to conduct the interview, list all the questions you want to ask. After the interview, enter the answers in keywords and note any other observations you should keep in mind. The action plan is then also a summary of the interviews you conducted. However, it does not replace a much more detailed protocol of each interview. With regard to the interview method, you usually opt for semi-structured interview. They sit halfway between a structured survey and an unstructured conversation. Unfortunately, they are often done in a rush without proper planning and analysis. The result can be a pile of interview notes that don't contain the information you need, or simply repeat the same points over and over without adding anything new. Therefore, you should dedicate sufficient time for preparing the interview. Ideally, two consultants take part in the interview, one who asks questions and the other will take notes. And this is rarely the case. It is even more important to take notes for your protocol directly after the interview when the memory is still fresh. Also, after the interview, do a kind of self-assessment. Ask yourself what went well and what you need to improve and how you can do that. Integrate the results in the interview guideline for the next interview. Now it is time to write. Don't forget, the purpose of an assessment is to gather relevant information about the labor market in order to make suggestions to improve the functioning. Focus on the relevant information. Writing is a participative process, and you should continuously check your findings with your team. Once you have the preliminary end version, these suggestions or recommendations should be discussed during a public event. Participants are the initial target group or clients of the assessment. The group can be enlarged by the interview partners as this event gives them opportunities to see what they said in the context of the report. Additional participants can be representatives of all those stakeholders you suggest in your recommendations. The group should not be too big to allow critical discussions and exchange among participants on the contents. After the official welcoming, the first technical point of the public event is the presentation of the labor market assessment. You should briefly mention the objectives and the approach. Then focus on the main findings and your recommendations. Start with the end in mind. Give your audience a reason to listen. Do you know the 5/5/5 rule for visual presentations such as PowerPoint? Max 5 words per line of text, max 5 lines of text per slide, and max 5 text every slide in a row. Try to lose the bullet points and especially keep it simple. This is an example of the agenda as used in a number of dissemination events of labor market assessments, especially with participants from higher levels who will not be able to participate a full day. The art of the event is the group work. Here we recommend the word cafe method to simultaneously discuss different topics. Do you know the method? The basic idea of the word cafe is to bring learners or participants of a seminar into conversation with each other and thus to be able to intensively discuss and reflect on problems or questions in small groups. The conversations are meant to resemble everyday conversations in a street cafe. A deepening of the conversations is made possible by switching and mixing the participants several times. One facilitator stays at each table who briefly summarizes the discussion and prompts the new participants with questions if necessary. At the end, a final round is held in the plenum, where the facilitators of each table present their results. The method ensures that the seminar participants can meet, get to know each other, and exchange ideas quickly on different topics, and without fear of contact. The facilitator at each table has a crucial role. He is responsible for either taking notes himself or herself, or asking the participants to scribble on the tablecloth. The tablecloth is a large sheet of paper with some general ideas, preferably as small drawings. The facilitator does not need to be an expert on the topic. However, it is important that he or she has some general understanding on the question to be discussed and can prompt the participants. A summary of the topic for the facilitator helps to prepare well for the task and to animate the discussion. We met Dr. Olumide earlier, the Executive Director of the Helpman Development Institute, a Nigerian consulting company. Let's listen to what he can tell us about presenting a labor market assessment at a public event.
Gives you an opportunity for contributions from people in policy, people in industry, people in academia, people in development world to also provide some additional information that you might not have been able to pick up during your reviews for the LMA. In addition to that, since a lot of them are in practice, they're in the real world where things are happening. So it gives you an opportunity to have people help you drill down into what they see. For instance, what are the big sectors in terms of growth and job creation? What are the emerging sectors? And then what are the things you can do, things that you believe that you can do to open up jobs and opportunities in those sectors? And then in thinking through that, what are the things they will recommend in the short term and also in the long term? And then so that you put together all this information and you're able to incorporate them to update what you already have. So the one we did was really interesting. It took the form of a World Cafe, where you have the different groups of people split into like 4 or 5 groups, and each group taking turn to look at each group taking turn to look at specific areas of the analysis. It's really interesting. The one we did was really interesting in Lagos, and it was quite rich.
If you invite people to a public event, you need to give them a reason to come. In a sector that consists of a variety of quite different subsectors that do not necessarily have much in common, you need to find a suitable trigger. You could organize the public event as a side event to another activity, for example, a film or music festival. You could invite a public figure as a keynote speaker to create an incentive for attending the event. There are always topics that are of interest to all sectors, such as formal and informal work, social security or copyright and data protection. Or you could hold several events on each subsector, providing space for technical discussion and exchange. This might be the first step into the orange sector. Become creative. The stage is yours. For further information, we recommend the document on multi-stakeholder dialogue and cooperation approaches for employment services, with several case studies and valuable insights on cooperation approaches by GIZ. The Labor Market Assessment on Creative Industries in Nigeria, soon available on the ASPI website. And a short video on how to set up the World Cafe method. There is much more information on the ASPI website on specific topics relevant for labor market analysis. Check it out yourself with a search function on www.aspi.org. Looking forward to your experiences on the presentation of labor market assessment and or the orange sector. Congratulations, you reached the end of the last nugget. Congratulations, you reached the end of the last nugget. This was the labor market in a nutshell. You will receive your certificate after passing the last quiz on Anti-G. Good luck and all the best with organizing your labor market assessment and engaging actors behind the report.